Good evening to all the beautiful people tuning in. I'm here to help you sleep. Please support me by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'm also curious to know where you're watching from and at what time, so drop a comment below. Are you ready? Let's start with the first story.
The title of the story:
The demon bride who haunted my wedding night. I had always dreamed of a perfect wedding, a celebration of love with the woman I believed was my soulmate. Emily, with her radiant smile and kind eyes, seemed like the perfect woman. We met in college, and our love blossomed over the years. I never once questioned anything about her until the night of our wedding. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the full moon hung low in the sky as we said our vows in a quaint chapel surrounded by the lush countryside of England. The guests smiled, laughter filled the air, and the scent of roses mixed with the distant, earthy smell of the land. I couldn't have been happier. She was mine, and I was hers. That night, after the reception, we headed to the grand manor we had rented for our honeymoon, a centuries-old estate tucked deep into the rolling hills, far from the city lights. Its dark stone walls, ivy-clad windows, and creaking wooden doors seemed to embrace us, almost as if the house itself were welcoming us to a new life. As we arrived, the moonlight bathed the estate in an eerie glow. The manor was far more imposing than I remembered, its tall spires casting long, unsettling shadows over the lawn. Yet there was an allure about it that made it perfect for our romantic escape. Emily smiled at me as we entered the cold, silent house, her hand in mine, but something about her seemed off. Her eyes flickered as if she were lost in a memory, or perhaps a secret she couldn't share. The air inside the manor was heavy, thick with the scent of dust and aged wood. The flickering candlelight created long, dancing shadows on the walls. As I looked around, I couldn't help but feel an unease I hadn't anticipated. It was just a house, I told myself, just a house. But then Emily's demeanor began to shift. At first it was subtle. Her smile seemed forced, her movements stiff. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced by a coldness that sent chills down my spine. She excused herself and went upstairs to change into her nightgown. I stood in the parlor, staring at the roaring fire in the hearth, trying to shake off the odd feeling gnawing at me. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes as I heard the faintest scrape of footsteps on the floor above. My heart skipped. I had heard nothing of Emily's movements. She must have returned to the room. I called her name softly. "Emily?" No answer. Confused, I made my way up the staircase, the old wood creaking under my feet with every step. The air grew heavier with each passing moment, as if the house itself were alive and breathing. I reached the top of the stairs, looking down the dimly lit hallway to our room at the end. The door was ajar, a faint sliver of light creeping out from within. I pushed open the door slowly, expecting Emily to be in the room, but instead I was greeted with silence. The bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed, yet the room felt cold, colder than it had any right to be. I turned toward the adjoining hallway, my mind racing with possibilities. "Emily?" I called again, my voice rising. The hallway stretched on in the shadows, but there was no sign of her. Then I heard it, the faint whisper of a voice, low and almost melodic, echoing through the house. It wasn't Emily. A sudden creak echoed from behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, to find Emily standing in the doorway of our bedroom. But something was wrong. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Her once warm smile was gone, replaced by an unnatural, chilling expression. "Emily?" I whispered, unsure of what I was seeing.
She took a step forward, and I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. Her voice, when it came, was not the gentle tone I had known. It was deeper, raspier, as though something ancient was speaking through her. "Do you remember the story, my love?" she murmured, her voice trailing off into a soft, mocking laugh. I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes darkened further, and I saw a flash of something terrible, something inhuman in them. "The ritual," she whispered, her voice now echoing through the walls. "You've been part of it since the very first moment you met me." The house seemed to groan in response, the air thickening as a strange energy filled the space. The whispers from the walls grew louder, voices that had been trapped within the manor for centuries, their stories long forgotten by the living. Emily's lips curled into a grin, revealing sharp, blackened teeth. "I wasn't just any bride. I am the demon you unknowingly summoned when you fell in love with me. I've been waiting for this moment, waiting for you to marry me." I felt the ground beneath me tremble as the truth hit me like a bolt of lightning. I had been chosen, but not for the love I thought I had found. Emily had tricked me into marrying her, luring me into this twisted trap. Her family had performed the ritual years ago, binding her to me through a pact that no one could break. The walls of the room seemed to close in on me, the air growing colder, suffocating me. I tried to run, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. The faint sound of whispers, voices of the trapped souls that had come before me, echoed through the room. I tried to claw my way through the door, but it was useless. Then Emily's form shifted, her features twisting into something grotesque. Her body stretched unnaturally, her limbs elongating. The ground beneath us cracked open, and I could see flames flickering at the edge of the room. I knew then with horrifying clarity there was no escape. I had fallen into her trap. I was the latest victim of the curse that had bound her to this world. But just as I thought the darkness would swallow me whole, something unexpected happened. Emily stopped. Her features softened, her monstrous form retracting. She blinked, confused, as though she were waking from a dream. What am I doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I stood frozen, my body trembling in disbelief. She wasn't looking at me anymore, but at herself, as though the demon inside her had briefly receded. The whispers in the walls grew faint, as if the curse were weakening. "Emily," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She turned to me, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you," she sobbed. "I was cursed long before we met. I never meant to bring you into this." But the moment was fleeting. Her eyes flashed again, this time with something darker, and the air in the room thickened once more. "I'm sorry," she whispered, almost in sorrow, "but it's too late now." And in that moment, as the house groaned and the shadows deepened, I understood. The curse had never truly been hers to break. It had always been mine to bear. The twist, my marriage, had not been the trap. I had been the trap.
The title of the story:
The Cursed Groom Who Came Back from the Dead. Claire had always believed in fairy tales. She believed that there was someone out there who was meant for her, someone whose heart beat in perfect rhythm with hers. When she met Daniel, she knew, without a doubt, that he was the one. His smile was warm, his laugh infectious, and his heart as open as hers. Their engagement had been swift, but it felt like fate. They were perfect for each other, two souls destined to be together forever. It was a crisp autumn evening when Daniel proposed to Claire under the golden glow of the park's lampposts, the ground covered in a carpet of fallen leaves. She had said yes, and they were only days away from their wedding when disaster struck. The phone call came late at night, the kind of call that turns your world upside down. Daniel had been in a car accident. The driver of the other vehicle was drunk, and the crash had been fatal. Claire's world, once full of light and laughter, suddenly fell into suffocating darkness. For days, Claire couldn't leave the house. She sat in her room, surrounded by wedding plans that were now meaningless, staring at the empty chair beside her bed where Daniel should have been. The grief was unbearable, and her once beautiful life felt like a broken glass, each shard jagged and sharp. Then one night, things began to change. The first incident was subtle. Claire had been lying in bed, the room completely still, except for the distant hum of traffic. But then she heard it, a soft creak of footsteps from the hallway. At first she thought it was her imagination, grief playing tricks on her, but then it came again, the unmistakable sound of shoes pressing into the old wooden floor. She sat up, her heart thudding in her chest. "Daniel?" she whispered, almost too afraid to speak the name. No answer. The footsteps stopped just outside her door. She rose, hesitating before she reached for the doorknob. When she opened it, the hallway was empty, just darkness. The hairs on her neck stood up, but she convinced herself it was just her mind, unraveling in the grip of grief. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. The whispers came next. At first she thought she was hearing things, soft, indistinct murmurs in the air that echoed through the empty house. It wasn't until one night when she was in the kitchen washing dishes that she heard it clearly. The voice was low, too familiar, and sent a shiver down her spine. "Claire, I'm here." Her heart raced. She turned, the knife in her hand trembling. Nothing. The kitchen was empty.
Her mind was playing tricks on her, surely. But the worst of it was the scent of Daniel's cologne. It would appear at the strangest moments, when she walked through the house, when she opened her closet, even when she sat alone in her car. The same rich, musky fragrance that had lingered on his skin whenever he held her. It was as though he had never left. Claire tried to push these unsettling thoughts from her mind. She was grieving. She was lost. But then, the night everything changed came. It was late, well past midnight, when she heard the knock on the door. A single solid thud, followed by a soft scraping sound as if something was dragging across the floor. She froze. Who could be at the door at this hour?
Trembling, Claire approached the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the handle. The air around her grew cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, chilling you to your core. She opened the door, and there he stood, Daniel. But not the Daniel she remembered. The man in front of her was pale, far too pale. His skin had a sickly gray hue, as though life had drained from him entirely. His eyes were hollow, dark circles ringing the edges like bruises. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled too tight. And yet it was him. It had to be. "Daniel?" Claire whispered, barely able to breathe. She took a step back, the fear flooding her heart. Was this real, or was she losing her mind? He smiled, but it wasn't the smile she had known. It was a slow, unsettling grin that stretched too wide, too thin. "Claire," he said, his voice raspy, as though it hadn't been used in days, or perhaps longer. "I've come back for you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to run, but her feet were frozen in place. Why are you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. She couldn't bring herself to ask the question aloud. But Daniel took a step forward, and she stumbled back in fear. His eyes, those empty, soulless eyes, fixed on her with an intensity that sent a shudder through her body. "It's not me, Claire," he whispered, his voice trembling with something darker. "I'm not who I was, but I'm here. You called me back." Her chest tightened. She called him back. The air in the room grew thick with an eerie pressure, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, swirling like living things in the corners of the room. And then, in a sudden rush, the truth hit her. The curse. The old, ancient curse passed down through Daniel's family, something dark that had been waiting for the right moment. A curse that bound the dead to the earth, forcing them to return and haunt the living. The groom, her groom, had been claimed by it. Daniel's hand reached out toward her, and Claire felt an overwhelming dread. "You need to let me in, Claire. I can't leave you. Not again." She backed away, her mind racing. She had to do something. She had to break this curse before it consumed her. Before Daniel, what was left of him, tore everything apart.
But as she looked into those hollow eyes, she knew she couldn't. She couldn't kill the man she had loved. She couldn't hurt him. So instead, she did the only thing she could think to do. She closed the door in his face. The next morning, the house was silent. No footsteps, no whispers, no cologne. Claire stood by the door, her heart still pounding, and as she stared at the place where Daniel had stood just hours before, she realized something. He was gone, but the curse, it was still with her. It wasn't Daniel who had returned. It was the curse. The true horror, the twist that had been there all along, was that the curse was never just about Daniel. It was about her. And the curse, bound by the ancient forces of the past, was always meant for her. The door creaked open again, and this time there was no one standing on the other side, only the whisper, "Claire, you're mine now." And it was only then that she understood the true price of love, what happens when a soul refuses to let go.
The title of the story: The Devil's Wedding Vow. Eliza Mitchell had never believed in magic. The idea that forces beyond the natural world could control or shape her life seemed like something straight out of a fairy tale, a comforting fiction for the weak-minded. But that was before she met Adrian. It had all started on a crisp autumn evening when Eliza, a small-town librarian, attended a wedding in a village far from her own. The event was odd from the beginning. The bride and groom, dressed in strange, almost antique clothes, had an aura of unearthly calm about them. The church, an ancient building on the outskirts of the village, was shrouded in an oppressive fog that rolled through the cracks of its weathered stone walls, making it feel as though the very air was alive. The sounds of the ceremony, soft chants, murmured prayers, and the faint rustle of silk seemed to echo in the vast emptiness of the building. Yet amidst the strange atmosphere, it was Adrian who stood out. Tall, handsome, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her, he was a man of mystery. He approached Eliza with a soft smile, his gaze both intense and comforting, as if he had known her forever. "I don't think I've ever seen you before," he said, his voice smooth like velvet, "but you're exactly who I've been waiting for." Eliza had felt an inexplicable pull toward him, as if his presence unlocked something deep inside her, something forgotten and buried. When he asked for her hand in marriage in the dim glow of candlelight that night, her heart raced in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't logical, but she felt that somehow she had no choice but to say yes. The wedding itself was strange. Too many cryptic symbols, too many candles flickering unnaturally, and far too many guests who appeared to be strangers, their faces pale and hollow. But none of it mattered. She was in love, and the promise of a future with Adrian seemed to overshadow any doubts. The wedding night came too quickly. Their room in the old manor house was pristine, its tall windows framing a moonlit view of the barren landscape. The bed, draped in white lace, looked like something out of a dream. Adrian's touch was gentle, his lips soft on her skin. Yet beneath the warmth of his kiss, something felt wrong. As the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The room grew cold, too cold, a chill that sank into her bones. The shadows deepened, and Eliza heard the faintest of whispers, so soft it could have been the wind, but it was too clear. "Eliza, Eliza, you belong to him now."
At first, she thought it was her imagination. Perhaps a trick of the late hour, her mind worn from the wedding festivities. But then the whispering grew louder. Her heart began to pound as she sat up in the bed, scanning the room. Adrian had not moved. He lay there, his face serene, but his eyes, they were not the same. There was something empty about them, something cold. "Adrian?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" He turned toward her, and for the first time his smile seemed strained, as if forced. "You don't understand, do you, Eliza?" His voice, once soft and inviting, now carried an unsettling edge. "I didn't choose you because I love you. I chose you because you were meant for me from the very start." Eliza's blood ran cold as the realization dawned on her. Adrian wasn't a man at all. He wasn't even human. He was a demon, bound by an ancient vow to claim her soul as payment for an otherworldly pact. The marriage, the wedding, it had all been a ruse, a trap designed to ensnare her in his dark, cursed web. She backed away, horrified. No, this can't be real. This is a nightmare, right? But it wasn't a nightmare. The walls of the room seemed to close in, the air thick with dread. The whispering grew louder, now a chorus of voices chanting her name. "Eliza," they sang, "your soul is ours." Adrian's laugh echoed in the room, cold and hollow. "You think you can escape? You are already mine. The pact is sealed." Eliza stumbled from the bed, her mind racing. She couldn't let this happen. There had to be a way out. She had to break the curse, break free from him. Frantically, she searched the room, looking for anything she could use. It was then that she saw the old book on the shelf, an ancient tome bound in dark leather, covered in strange symbols. With trembling hands, she pulled it down and opened it. The pages were filled with arcane rituals, spells, and dark incantations. As she read aloud, a sudden chill filled the room, and the whispers grew louder. Adrian lunged toward her, his eyes glowing with an infernal fire. But as Eliza read the final words of the incantation, something unexpected happened. Adrian froze in place, his body convulsing as though he were being torn apart from within. "Why?" he gasped, his voice cracking. "You weren't supposed to know." Eliza felt a surge of power, of control she had never known before.
The book had not only revealed the truth of the curse, it had also given her the key to break it. As Adrian's form crumbled into a cloud of smoke and shadows, she realized the shocking truth. The demon was not the one who had made the pact. It was Eliza herself, in a previous life, who had sold her soul to ensure her eternal love. And now, in this twisted cycle, she had freed herself. As the smoke cleared, Eliza stood alone in the room, the weight of her newfound freedom settling on her shoulders. The curse had been broken, but the cost was more than she could ever have imagined. And as she left the room, the whispering voices faded, but one thing remained, a feeling deep in her chest that Adrian's vow had never truly been broken.